Donald Trump privately suggested to Zelensky to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The new US president is convinced that only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to come to the negotiating table. At this very moment, Moscow-Sity is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain at VTB's central office. All of this is happening against the backdrop of new drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. And all of this is a new phase of the war. And we are seeing Russia truly afraid for the first time. What kind of signal did Trump send? What missiles could be supplied to Ukraine? JASSM or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all of this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work together twice a week on my YouTube channel. Sasha, the most important question, what happens now?
The strike on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing. It's not for nothing that Moscow-Sity is being evacuated. Everyone is being sent to work remotely. It's not for nothing that official Z-bloggers, war correspondents, even the authorities, the military and generals have started saying that yes, there will be a combined missile and drone strike directly on Moscow. In other words, they are preparing for retaliation, for a harsh response. We discussed with you just this week that a harsh response is expected any day now. I said before, wait 10 days, there will be a response. And here you go. And I gave it 10 days. And as you can see, I was right. I assessed the situation a bit more accurately, perhaps, than even Donald Trump. Just kidding, Dasha. The point is there will be a response. There will be a harsh strike. Moscow is preparing for this. Most likely, for the first time, Moscow will be set ablaze. All those oligarchs, all of Rubliovka will burn. They don't feel the war there, you see? Many people here ask me, but Kiev is being hit, right? Very often, representatives of the Russian political emigration ask me this question. Kiev is being hit, but Kiev keeps working, standing, living, and so on. I say, yes, but Kiev has long felt that the war has come to the Ukrainian capital, but Moscow hasn't felt that yet. Now it will feel it 100%. Everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who after getting drunk started talking about how Trump is just decorative with his statements. The only one who's decorative is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. In terms of height, mental, and intellectual abilities, in how he managed to drink away his power in a single night, in his cowardice, he's decorative in all of that, and especially in how he's now sucking up to Putin, afraid he'll be finished off. Twitter this, Twitter that, you know? One moment he criticizes Trump, the next he praises him. It all depends on Vladimir Putin's mood. This is a man who drank away his power in a single night and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake, all because he was afraid they'd drown him. In just one night. And now he's talking about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. You can just remember this for the rest of your life. Just write it down somewhere if you need to. That's the first thing. Second, of course, what they're moving to remote work now isn't just, military enterprises, but Moscow-Sity, that is an elite complex with office spaces where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Kurchenko has offices, where a huge number of Russian security officials, FSB agents, have offices, where Bashar Assad and his family have an apartment. This suggests that most likely they are going to shoot things down. They want to shoot things down, and they don't care where they do it. Obviously, the goal is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets, military facilities like the General Staff on Frunzenskaya near Arbat. Well, it's right on Arbat. So what we've been talking about and predicting with you, Dasha, over the past weeks or even months is starting to come true. Many people thought maybe we were crazy, that I was making things up. No. Here you go. Now drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this. That's what they're saying over there in Russia. Gerasimov says it. The whole propaganda pack is announcing it. Everyone, absolutely everyone. Go ahead. Moscow will say whatever Trump says. Why aren't you striking Moscow? You said it right in the preview. Why aren't you striking Moscow? There's no weapons. Give us weapons and we'll strike. All right. But then don't just strike Moscow. Hit St. Petersburg too. In other words, the Americans are raising the stakes. It's just that Putin went all in. And Trump thought, well, fine, but I've got more trump cards. My last name literally means trump card. So let me play from my own hand. And he did. Now he's already considering supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine. And that's the kind of weapon that pierced 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawks, 30 Tomahawks, and there are no longer 2 nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we think there couldn't be several nuclear plants on Russian territory after a Tomahawk strike? Now, JASSM missiles, air-to-air missiles, and ballistic missiles will be sent here to Ukraine. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one, without any ambiguity, showing everything, demonstrating to Vladimir Putin that catastrophic strikes on Moscow would follow. And now there will be combined strikes, drones, and missiles. They'll simply turn off the lights over Moscow. And they'll turn off the lights over Russia as well. And the lights will go out over Vladimir Putin's regime too. It's long overdue. And if Trump is already asking, why aren't you striking? That means he's come up with the idea, most likely a 100% idea. Why not do something to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin? Surely that's what they're betting on. So I expect a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Everything will burn, absolutely everything, and that's already inevitable. They brought this disaster into their own home themselves when they started the war. They brought this disaster into their own home themselves when they chose Vladimir Putin once again, when they helped him, dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Trostianets, Mariupol, and the rest of the list. They are the ones to blame. They brought this nightmare upon themselves. Now, it won't just be hellish sanctions. Now it will be hell on earth. Trump promised hell on earth for Iran, but in the end, hell on earth came to Vladimir Putin.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a decisive game changer. Write what you think about the ATAC-TMS, about the call, and about the phone conversation between Zelensky and Trump when basically Trump asked, why aren't you striking Moscow? President Zelensky said, we have nothing to strike with. And now Trump is giving them something to strike with. Sasha, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbas to continue his military actions, his offensive, aggressive, terrorist operation, and only after that would he introduce any measures. In other words, there was some kind of agreement between Trump and Putin. You take what you need, and then we'll impose sanctions. What do you think?
Dasha, you see, that's not how it works. If there had been a backroom deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations between the Europeans and Trump. None of this would have happened, and no one would have given anything to Ukraine. The backroom deal is formed in a completely different way. First of all, a shipment of weapons has to arrive. Let me remind you that Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. But in order to carry out that strike, everything had to arrive, including the American carrier groups, which had to approach, as well as American fighter jets, American reconnaissance planes, and American intelligence data. And the intelligence services had to do their job and figure out who was where, how they were positioned, and in which bunker Ayatollah Khomeini was hiding. It's the same situation here. Stockpile weapons, accumulate systems, acquire anti-missile systems, and then carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes in response to what Vladimir Putin will do. Yes, of course, Putin will strike. It's clear that he will. He will try to advance in the Donbas. These are obvious things, Dasha. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin hasn't been able to seize the Donbas. And in fact, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take the Donbas. That's the first point. Second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and with China. Because right now, Trump is holding negotiations with both the Indians and the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. So it's a matter of trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. Right now, Lavrov is in Beijing and he's negotiating with Xi Jinping, and the Chinese side has said they will support Russia even more. Well, that's it, all right? If they give more support, they'll get sanctions. We're not talking about sanctions against Russia. We're talking about secondary sanctions, sanctions against China, against India, against buyer countries, against companies and legal entities that purchase oil, gas, nuclear materials, electricity, or coal from Russia, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about, secondary sanctions. About targeting buyer countries, countries that allow the Russian oil fleet to sell everything under the sun and to roam freely. Countries that even allow certain shadow deals to take place and let goods pass through their territories. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. About some countries of the European community. That's what we're talking about. And which side do they officially ultimately take, so that everyone understands the game being played? And thirdly, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal state budget begins. It's necessary to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not. What appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine for specific counteraction against Putin, and what will Putin do? Right now, it's important to assess the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops, and so on. What will happen next? So, they'll assess the situation, and then they'll strike. There's simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself overturned the board. I think now he deeply regrets it. He's biting his nails, his elbows, and everything else he can bite. But the problem is, Dasha, that he's the one to blame for all of this. He overdid it. He ruined everything, as the New York Times rightly pointed out. Now, very difficult, catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason as well, Dasha. Putin started defending his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport Starovoyt. He went after Kemezov's clan, who until recently was his friend, and once again started cracking down on the Shoigu and Patrushev clans, and so on. He started going after them again, and these repressive measures are gaining more and more momentum. He started destroying his own elite at the wrong time, because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people, vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, high-ranking officials vote with their feet and come to Starovoyt's funeral, and Putin mocks them, first saying that a wreath was sent, then taking his words back. And they understand that, well, all right, now Lubyanka will come after their asses too. In other words, we're talking about Trump applying pressure, Russia facing economic problems, a mess, and at the same time, the possibility of some kind of coup starting. Because the oligarchs who bankroll these ministers, the officials, and the military leadership all understand perfectly well that Putin started the fight, that Putin struck first against them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now, Trump will apply pressure, and they will too, and they'll try to destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dasha. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow or the day after to the news that tanks have entered Moscow, surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is gone. A coup in Russia. Hooray. I don't know. But the fact is, they will act and watch how hard Trump goes after Putin, and they'll base their actions on that. That's a fact. This is probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war, of this, the tension of this war. It won't be easy. It will be turbulent. And at times it will be tough. But for Putin, in the end, it will all end badly. These are fateful days for the war, for Ukraine. Yes, but these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other choice. To use Margarita Simonyan's words, he simply can't back down. He just can't anymore. And Putin will choke on him. And it's Vladimir Putin's fault. He himself is to blame for what happened.
Sasha, are Tomahawk cruise missiles a tangible reality in the coming months? Or is it still an unrealistic prospect for the foreseeable future?
This is Trump raising the stakes. This is Putin's blackmail.
Yes.
Trump showed him several times what the Tomahawk system is, what Tomahawk missiles are. He demonstrated this once in Syria when he destroyed, just obliterated the Syrian bases where Russian military and Russian aircraft were stationed. He showed what American weapons are capable of with the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he wiped out as well. He showed what Tomahawks can do with the example of Iran. And now he says, that's it. I will send Tomahawks to both Zelensky and Ukraine. Hundreds of them. Take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes. Yes, he's raising the stakes, but he doesn't want the war to truly turn into a global, large-scale one. He doesn't want to fight Putin directly, but he probably has to do it, or will have to do it. But for now, he's raising the stakes as high as they can go, to the point of no more. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has a broader range of maneuver, you see? He's showing Putin, I can even give Tomahawks. And you have nothing to counter these Tomahawks with. The Patriots are mine, those are my Patriots. I have the best anti-missile systems, and you don't have them. If there has already been a strike on Siberia, and Siberia was burning, I don't know, for the second or third time, just in the past month even. You see, before, Russian territory was an asset, a vast territory. It was almost impossible to get all the way across, right? You'd get as far as the Urals, and then somewhere out there, you'd just give up and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is actually a disadvantage. It's a negative factor, because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone systems, anti-missile systems, you see? It's impossible. So once again, they'll just protect Putin somewhere behind him near the Kremlin, while all of Moscow will be burning. They'll protect St. Petersburg, and Siberia will be burning. You see? So Tomahawks are a real possibility in the future. And when Putin says no, that's it. And most likely he will say no. He simply has no other option. He can't show weakness. He can't show his security forces on whom he depends and on whom all his power is built. That, guys, I chickened out, I can't do it. He will go all the way. He will keep making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep pushing further and further, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Ultimately, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. And we're already approaching that situation.
Everyone has already written that things are starting to heat up in Sevastopol. Pro-Russian public pages in occupied Crimea are writing that Trump might strike Sevastopol with Jazz missiles, which have replaced the Tomahawks. They say things are also on the edge there. Recent comments, Trump is considering supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. They can reach Moscow and St. Petersburg. Panic is starting in the Kremlin and the propagandists are already howling. So this is exactly that zone of tension that is now rapidly developing in Russian military public pages. Would you agree?
And notice, Dasha, Trump hasn't supplied anything yet. You see, that's a skill in itself. He hasn't done anything yet, and the Moscow exchange is already starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet, and the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet, and already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet, and there's already a problem starting in Crimea. And there aren't even any Tomahawks yet. Now, attention. Imagine the situation, friends. There are Tomahawks, and the Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply all of this hysteria by 10, no, by 100, just multiply it. They'll go insane. They aren't even here yet. And they're already starting to rant about how it's all for show. And when they do appear, I don't know, they'll all just disappear. As soon as the Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the first person who won't be in Moscow is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. He'll fly away, and that's already happened before. You're laughing, Dasha, but that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through Rostov, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood anything. Everyone stayed put. Everyone was scared. Who ran away? Putin and Medvedev. Putin and Medvedev. Putin took Medvedev by the hand because the constitution says that in case anything happens, Medvedev also has a lifetime term, that he is untouchable. Medvedev is the only president who is untouchable. Besides Putin, Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand, like a bride, and flew off with him in an unknown direction to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as Tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will immediately vanish. He'll be gone in an instant because everything about Dmitry Medvedev is just for show.
Sasha, did you notice how, the NATO Secretary General totally trolled, mocked, that's putting it harshly, Medinsky during the negotiation process when they were discussing things with Trump? So Trump was trying to explain that, I call Putin and Putin says everything is fine. Then my wife Melania tells me that Kyiv is being bombed. So what's so good about that? But I believed him. And then NATO Secretary General Rutte says to him, how can you believe them if they send Medinsky to spout some nonsense, some pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia?
No. What they said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who was talking about the history of Russia starting from the year 1245.
Yes.
So obviously Trump was once told about Medinsky, but he forgot about him. This is not the kind of person worth remembering. That's the truth. And Medinsky's books, those are the books that need to be reread constantly. But it's just that once again, Trump showed that Putin sends some random people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk seriously. What does that tell us? It means that sooner or later, if Putin is told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinsky, only the key figures from now on, people who make decisions, and you personally. I won't accept anything else. There's no room left for maneuver, Sasha. You can't send Medinsky anymore. You can't send some random person from some unclear department or some advisor of yours. You can't. Only top-level representatives and only you personally, where your signature is at the end on the peace agreement and so on. Because Putin has basically been given an ultimatum. Either a peace agreement with Zelensky within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces, to hell. That's all he was told. As for Melania Trump, we need to urgently check if she has Ukrainian roots. I feel like that person sitting there, I can just picture the scene. I don't know. I can really picture it. Trump comes home, tired after work. He saw football for the first time. He visited some stadium. He cut some ribbon somewhere. There, I don't know, he drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home to the second floor of the White House. He comes into the house. Melania speaks. She says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir, with Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald, they hit Kyiv, they hit Lutsk. So, after a considerable amount of searching and careful consideration, I truly believe that we have finally discovered the individual who possesses an exceptional and comprehensive understanding of the intricate geography of Ukraine. This remarkable person is Sasha, who was notably present at the significant inauguration ceremony.
Yes, and they even lived in the same room during the competition. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually Melania Trump who introduced Alexandra Nikolenko, a Ukrainian, Miss Ukraine, to her future husband, who later became her husband and Donald Trump's business partner. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's specifically because of Sasha Nikolenko, since they're friends. And since Melania is European, basically, she should know European geography because she's not American. This is about how Trump fights against migrants, even though his wife is an American and was born in Europe.
Well, you see, for example, I personally wouldn't have made that connection regarding Sasha Nikolenko. But if that's the case, then I want to tell you that Melania Trump and Trump himself in general have a daily review of the situation in Ukraine. And that's a good thing. If he has already said this directly, Sasha, it means this information is reaching him. And that's also good. That's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions after all of this. you have absolutely conveyed the meaning of Dmitry Medvedev's post, which ends with the statement that this particular statement was indeed made by Medvedev. But here's the crucial question that arises. What exactly will the esteemed President Putin do if Medvedev unequivocally declares that Russia genuinely doesn't care, meaning it truly doesn't care at all about all these various words and pronouncements from Trump and all his numerous threats and intimidating gestures?
Putin does care. Putin will now try in these 50 days to restore contact with Trump, but at the same time, he will strike at Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He talked to them, his representatives met with them. The media told everyone that he was putting direct pressure on Netanyahu. But in the end, it turned out that Musk carried out 3 brilliant special military operations together with the Israeli military intelligence, Aman. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants to do, but weapons have gone to Ukraine, and missiles will go to Russia, to Moscow first and foremost. What is Vladimir Putin doing today? That's what's interesting. We're skipping over this. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Russia launches a drone that first flies into Ukrainian territory, then turns into Belarusian territory, flies through Belarus, and then returns back from Belarusian territory, supposedly as if it were a Belarusian drone flying into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kyiv from the north. Once again, Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything to pull Lukashenko away from the Americans, from Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention. Lukashenko suddenly sends up a military helicopter and effectively destroys the reconnaissance drone at the heavily guarded Belarusian-Ukrainian border area. What does this tell us? This shows that Vladimir Putin still wants to drag Lukashenko into this war, to do everything so that Lukashenko is neutralized, to seize power over Belarus and send his army through Belarusian territory, to use Belarus as a staging ground, either against all of NATO in the east or rather in the west, or directly for Putin himself, or directly against Ukraine from the north. But as we're discussing, Sasha, Vladimir Putin has clearly realized that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied together with Putin right now, that Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and that Lukashenko has been promised something, and what he's been promised is very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't want to. But Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump, aside from the topic of Ukraine, during his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, was as follows: that the United States, they are directly involved and were the party that reconciled, that initiated the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, Trump is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. We were wondering why all of this is happening. Trump. That's why all of this is happening. So, attention Dash. Finland, Sweden, NATO bases, St. Petersburg is surrounded. NATO troops are practically on the approach to St. Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, along with troops from 28 other NATO member countries after the end, or rather, after the beginning of the ceasefire, the silence regime. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian base in Gyumri, Armenia disappears. If Armenia closes all Russian bases on its territory. What do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he won't get Ukraine no matter how hard he tries, wants to prolong the war. It's one thing when you're playing to deplete Ukraine's reserves and resources, and another thing when you're playing to deplete America's reserves and resources. They are not comparable. You have far fewer resources and you will lose this war if Trump gets involved. And he turned on. Therefore, he will look for other opportunities for himself. I think there are two options to consider. 3 options. The first option is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and to destroy the Lukashenko regime and Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt to undermine Armenia and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third scenario is the start of a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future we may witness these scenarios unfold. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the common people, needs something to be shown on television. Now, this is what they will be showing.
Sasha, a small digression. A whole article has come out about Melania Trump. As they say, we are at the forefront. The Times writes a big article that Zelensky has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2022, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrible and tragic, the murder of innocent Ukrainians. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a fiend. She constantly appealed to her followers, urging them to help Ukraine. She has much more political influence over her husband than was previously thought. It is noted that despite the presence of numerous security and foreign policy advisors, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those close to him, and even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think?
I'll say that we've gained an unexpected ally. No one saw this coming. We've gained an unexpected ally. And honestly, Dasha, that's really good news. You know, it's actually very encouraging because for a long time, Ukraine was searching for ways, for approaches to convince Trump. And it turns out there wasn't much need to search after all. It turned out that there's the first lady who can just go directly, bypassing everyone else, and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodya Putin. End things with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out, for Trump, that's enough. That's enough. It's much more than all the negotiations with Putin, more than any persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on, more than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turns out that Melania and Trump are quite enough. This is very good news for Ukraine, really. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence she'll have, whether she'll continue to support Ukraine or not. But as things stand today, if thanks to Melania and Trump, Ukraine gets deadly missiles, full protection of its skies, 17 Patriots, and even Tomahawk missiles, then she deserves a monument in the center of Kyiv and a street named after Melania Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, as you always say, Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face. And the Atlantic completely agrees with you because the Atlantic too. So the Atlantic wrote to her about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin officially humiliated Trump. He just officially humiliated Trump. And Trump can't get over it. There you go. A public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Trump even told Melania about it. What is this? Listen, he's just humiliating you. And that was the end of it, you see? And then things moved on. Here we are talking and talking. Things are moving. So what's the conclusion? The action has started. They wanted action. They can't live without it. Well, here you go. You can certainly get your action right now, so please go ahead and take it.
Sasha, news is breaking while we're streaming. Germany might buy a Typhoon launcher from the US to launch Tomahawk missiles. As I understand it, Tomahawks have become our new buzzword. Now that's all we talk about.
Dasha, so what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has cut loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about two Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just the other day, Solovyov was shouting about this. There's no need for a Solovyov in America. They have Trump. Now Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now Trump will be telling absolutely everyone in the world about it every day. About what the best, most powerful weapon systems are and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. And now imagine 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, Medvedev, and everyone else. There's a good chance that even before these 50 days are up, someone in the Kremlin will throw in the towel. Because they're unlikely to withstand such an information attack. Honestly, they're more likely to mess themselves.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all supplies will go through Germany. This is very important. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has also done a lot. Again, Fico is in hysterics, Orban and others too, and now even Malta is joining in, basically Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do, and will oil prices finally go down?
Trump will deal with these guys if Putin actually pushes him all the way. Because if anyone has direct influence over Orban and Fico, it's Trump. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. For example, when Germany stops supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. This has happened before. When he was blackmailed with cars, automobiles, he immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. Do you remember that situation when former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was taking place? He might have to take a walk more than once if necessary. A lot has actually changed in the past few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully realize that this is a new stage of the war. And this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. The pace is just insane. It's a terrifying pace. There was this kind of momentum at the start of the big war, at the beginning of the invasion. Probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new impulse. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably had that hope too. Or maybe not hope, but an illusion. He probably had that too. Or thoughts that he could make a deal with Putin, that there would be a deal, and basically even profit off Russia. The deal is over, the illusions are over. And now there's a new impulse. Trump probably liked that. To go to war. Trump probably liked the image of a burning Moscow. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe a day, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But that he will take it out on Putin, that's 100%. What will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? The desire to start that fire. What will happen in Europe now? The desire to help start that fire. What will happen in Ukraine now? Something new. A new impulse, a new hope that the Vladimir Putin regime will finally collapse. And I am incredibly happy about this because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope are the last things Vladimir Putin can try to take from us, but he will never succeed.
A wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the Sasha plus Sasha format, Sasha plus Sasha twice a week. Write a few words in support of our tandem. I know you leave a lot of different comments. I read them, I give them hearts. So thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from. Tell us your location. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, and Monday, we are on my YouTube channel, Sasha Shaslivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel. Top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Sasha, thank you very much. And see you this weekend.
Until next time. Bye.